Hi, parents, and welcome to Increasing Compliance at Home. My name is Cassandra Wilson, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst as well as the Senior Associate Director of Sports, BIP, and Camp programs within the Kinney Center. So welcome. I hope this finds you well. I hope by now that you guys have gotten a chance to see our introductory videos in regards to what we're going to be offering virtually as a program. I also want to send my well wishes. I hope that all of you are doing well and safe and healthy at this time. We definitely miss you, but we do want to be a support as much as we can during this interesting time. I also, before we begin, want to give a quick disclaimer. This is not going to take the place of any behavior support plans that you have implemented at home. This is more of a general overview of something that may help you or some tips that may help you to increase some compliance for non-compliance that you may be seeing at home if you don't have a behavior plan or you just need some help in this certain area. I hope that you're able to get some knowledge out of this. And if you already know these tips, I hope that it's a refresher for you. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us or all of us, and we will gladly support you the best way possible. So we're going to get started. So how to maintain some structure within chaos. So for many of our families, there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this whole time and COVID-19. I know for myself, I pretty much have avoided as much as possible turning on the news just because there's an elevated level of anxiety in our country right now. And I can only imagine what this is doing, to our children and to our learners that don't have the ability to express, all that they are feeling or the language to communicate, their feeling and their needs. So my heart really just goes out to, all of the children and everyone just struggling with this. But while we don't have control over everything going on around us, there are some aspects that we can control for ourselves as well as our loved ones. For me, it's having control over it is not turning on the news for me and just going about, as much as I can my day-to-day within the home. And for our learners, it just means, implementing some structure and consistency. So one of the most important things we can implement is that structure and consistency. So within that structure and consistency, however, there may be some requirements to complete some non-preferred or lesser preferred activities throughout the day. So typical examples can include like nap times, bedtimes, chores, hygiene tasks, especially like teeth brushing and showering, academics. This is a huge one considering that all of the educational programming has been disrupted. Kinney programs have been disrupted. It is a lot. So home, which was once the safe place and not as many demands, it has now become our everything. So academic tasks are being placed at home, and it just sends a very confusing message. Also practice. So for those of you that have in-home, behavior supports, your provider may not be able to come to the home. So parents, it has pretty much been put on you to kind of implement and maintain the progress and practice with those skills. So again, another difficult time. And transitions, just having to transition from one thing to the other, getting off the iPad, having to transition from, taking a break and what you usually do in your room versus having to go to the table and do schoolwork, things like that. So for many of our learners, these requests are often coincide with those problem behaviors. So the tantrums, melts, physical aggression, self-injurious behaviors, or any other problem behaviors. And while sometimes, as parents, we can be flexible and things like that, not everything is negotiable. So some things you absolutely have to do. And I do want to reiterate that as a parent, it's very important that we do, maintain that balance and we don't let our children get out of everything, because that just sets a false precedence, for life. And we want our learners to succeed in every way possible. So there are some things that we're going to have to stand firm on and just, you just have to wait it out and kind of get through it. And it's important to teach our children that as well. And however, with the non-negotiables, there are some simple strategies that can make the compliance a little bit easier. So I hope that you're able to use one or if not all of these to get through the day in your structured schedules. So first, let's define. So according to Merriam-Webster, non-compliance is defined as the failure or refusal to comply with something such as a rule or regulation. So for our learners, non-compliance may typically be defined as any occurrence of the learner not complying or initiating with a directive immediately after the directive is given. So for some learners, this can also include the displays of tantrums, melts, the whining, verbal protests, etc. So this is often the behavior that we want to decrease or we want to go away altogether. And of course, with that, according to Merriam-Webster, compliance, which is what the target of this training is defined as the active process of complying to a desired, demand, proposal, or regimen. So simply put, this is following or complying with the directive given, or our learner demonstrating what we ask of them or what we want them to do. So this is the behavior that we want to keep and we want to increase. So with that, so how do we do that? One of the great tools in applied behavior analysis that we typically use, and some of you may see in a lot of behavior plans and that we use oftentimes at Kinney, is the Premack Principle. So parents, I don't want you to stress, the Premack Principle is something very easy that can be incorporated in your everyday language and working with your child and working with all of your children in reality. This is commonly referred to as first then language. So the only tool that you really need is your words, maybe some pictures, however you want to implement this procedure. So this can easily be communicated to the learner by stating the non-preferred lesser preferred activity first, followed by the more preferred activity immediately after. I do want to preface this that it doesn't always have to be preferred and non-preferred. Sometimes it's the Premack Principle is literally just arranging first this activity, then the next activity. So it just kind of depends. But I just use, preferred following non-preferred just as another example of how you can use it to kind of get through those activities throughout the day in your schedule. So I have a scenario here. Billy wants the iPad but needs to pick up his toys. Mom tells Billy, first toys, then iPad. Billy continues to whine, and Mom repeats that statement. Billy begins to pick up the toys. When he's done, Mom gives him the iPad. So there, it really is that simple. Of course, in the scenario, I was very clear to put that Billy continued the behavior. I don't want you to think that the behavior is magically going to go away. Behaviors and things like that, changing behavior, it does take time. But this, with consistency, is an effective measure to communicate just some clear and concise directives to get our learners to comply. So developing a structured schedule. So schedules are extremely effective for learners of all levels. For many of us who, pretty much live and do a lot of our everyday work, we live by our phone calendars, reminders, Google Calendar, things like that. That's essentially a structured schedule. So you're able to organize the different aspects of your day. So structured schedules for our learners can be a simple picture schedule with just 2 tasks on it, like similar to the first then, or it can be as long as the entire day. So it pretty much just depends on the functioning and processing level of the individual. Some different ways to break it up. Maybe you can have, 2 or 3 activities and then kind of change those, use some Velcro and change them out. If you don't have all those materials, maybe even writing it down, you can write down the whole day, maybe the first half of the day and the second half of the day, however you need to be creative in doing that. If you do need some templates or anything we can support you with, please feel free to reach out. We have tons of templates and don't mind creating some templates for your learner to use at home. So some tips when you are using a scheduling structured schedule. Try to have preferred activities follow non-preferred activities if you can when you're arranging the order of the activities. So first clean room, then break or work, then snack. However you can arrange it, that will just drive it in the future. There's a slide in here that we'll talk about behavioral momentum, so that will come into play. Another tip for a structured schedule is adding times to remain on track. So this is more so for the implementer, just so you're sure that you have a nice healthy balance of maybe leisure preferred or leisure skills or leisure activities versus non-preferred activities. Plus it helps for our clients that maybe have a interest in time. It allows them to keep remain on track, and at certain times when that may occur, instead of them constantly asking you and you having to respond, you can simply redirect them to that schedule in that particular time frame. Include choices. As I mentioned, have your learner help with creating the schedule. This is very important. We're going to talk about the next slide, the importance of choices, but this is something that you should incorporate when you're developing a structured schedule. Keep the directives simple and clear. Use timers if needed. That is a great tool to help with self-monitoring, and it helps to kind of communicate with your learner that there's a clear start and finish. Sometimes it's much easier to put together. So use timers for the beginning of the activity versus the next activity. That also helps with transitioning as well. And add pictures and words. This is another teaching tool to put words and pictures together. So use that to maximize understanding and processing as best as possible. So choices, choices, choices. So I had mentioned previously on the last slide the power of incorporating the choices with your learner and having them be a part of developing their structured schedule. So whenever possible, provide choices for your learner when selecting the activity, ordering the activity, or arranging parts of the activity. This is important, and this will just help go along with that behavioral momentum that I'll talk about, and it will just make the individual more likely to engage in whatever it is that you're asking. When they have a part of it, they can take some pride and some ownership, and they're just more likely to do it. This can also help with increasing compliance, especially for non-preferred activities. And this helps with increasing independence. So for our older learners, this gives them a voice, some self-advocacy in their day-to-day. So this is a great way to transition and to kind of teach that. If you're worried about how to incorporate choices and you have a learner that maybe is less verbal or non-vocal, you can do this by holding up two pieces of the material or two items and having the individual point or guiding their hand to point. This will teach them how to make a choice. If you are doing that, I do suggest that you try to limit it to no more than two items that you're showing at a time, just so it makes it not as overwhelming when making that choice. So some tips when implementing choices. Try to avoid questions that can be answered with yes or no. This is huge. Instead, provide choices within the activity. So what I mean by that is instead of saying like, do you want to clean your room? 9 times out of 10 for most kids, the answer, and even adults, because myself, if I have to clean, the answer is going to be no. So instead say, would you like to put your toys away first or make your bed? This just allows for the choices to happen within the activity and just still provides that sense of independence. So our next tool and tip is known as the high probability task sequence. So do not fret. Again, I'm going to break this down. This is derived from the principle in applied behavior analysis of behavioral momentum. So in simpler terms, high probability task sequence is simply giving a few short, easy tasks that your learner can easily do or typically complies with, followed by a harder task. So again, this uses behavioral momentum, and behavioral momentum propels our learner to continue moving forward within the task completion. So I'm going to give you an example to kind of bring it home here. Billy does not like doing schoolwork. Mom first begins by giving Billy simple, short tasks she knows he can easily do. So here we have in red, we have the demand given by mom. In blue, we have the behavior demonstrated by Billy. And in green, we have what mom does after. So first, Billy, touch your head. Billy touches his head. Mom says, great job. Very simple, right? Billy, sit in chair. Billy sits in the chair. Mom says, great job listening. Billy, touch your nose. Billy touches his nose. Mom says, great job listening. Billy, clap your hands. Billy claps his hands. Mom says, great job listening. Now, here we have, keep in mind, the academic task that Billy hates doing. So Billy, touch red. Billy touches red. Mom says, great job touching red. So by giving him all of those things that he can do easily, it kind of instilled a level of confidence and compliance, and he was able to just drive through and do it. It became a force. So we used these to propel him to do the one that he did not want to do. Remember, with all of these examples, mom provided some form of verbal praise. So remember to provide positive praise or reinforcement after the desired behavior. But again, high probability task sequence or behavioral momentum, it really is that simple. You can shorten it. You may not have to use all of these simple tasks, but I just wanted to give you guys a clear example of how it would typically flow in a training or teaching setting. So another way to increase compliance is to break down the tasks. So sometimes the overall idea of the task can be overwhelming. So to put it in perspective, parents, think of doing spring cleaning or yard work. Those are super scary titles that we really don't feel like doing. However, if we break it down, like maybe raking leaves or putting some fall clothes away, we can kind of get through that and take it piece by piece and step by step. So the same thing goes for our learners. Sometimes breaking down the task into shorter, more simpler steps will increase that compliance. So instead of saying, let's do our morning routine, which is this overwhelming, multi-step, multi-layered process, let's just say, let's brush our teeth. And again, although brushing your teeth is part of the morning routine, it allows for that step-by-step presentation. So with all of these, I can't forget to remind you, do not forget to reinforce at the end. Reinforcement is drives the behaviors that we want to keep and want to sustain and teach in the future. When you're delivering reinforcement, make sure it's as quickly and as immediately as possible. Don't try to delay it just because it's not easy for our learners to make that connection into what they did versus what the reinforcement that they received. Also, provide it after the correct responses or desired behavior. Reinforcers don't always have to be elaborate, but sometimes it is needed. So you might have to use that iPad for brushing your teeth, but you also, in the long run, you could possibly use for positive praise too. It just depends on what the amount of effort that the learner has to put forth and what they're motivated by. Reinforcers can also include things like good job, high fives, a special toy, special snack, quick game, song, etc. The possibilities are endless. So make sure that you mix it up. Make sure that you have fun. For parents, sometimes it's honestly positive praise and excitement and enthusiasm it can be enough to motivate that behavior and drive it in the future. So again, I say that would never underestimate the power of positive praise. So just some takeaways, parents. Just remember, be patient as possible. This is really just an interesting time, and it's a challenging time, not just for our children, but for us too. So there's a lot of uncertainty going on. We're overwhelmed. Everything has kind of fallen on us to keep, everything flowing. So just be patient. There's going to be some harder days and days harder more so than others, especially as time goes on. So just remember that for your learners as well. But with that, set those limits and expectations. That is totally okay. You want to use that to maintain the consistency. And it's just going to make that transition back to when things get more normalized. It's going to make that transition so much easier. Be consistent. So try not to, put things in place that you are not actively able to deliver. Make sure the reinforcers are things that you have, accessible and not promises going forward, just because that just, creates a dynamic that you don't want, and it will hinder, continued behavioral progress in the future. Be creative, be fun, try to think outside the box with different things. We're going to be posting some recreational ideas and different lessons and programming that you can do at home. And we're going to try and be creative with household tools and things that you don't have to go to the store for. You don't have to use, extra money or resources for. Remember to troubleshoot and reflect. So sometimes hindsight is great to kind of look back on an interaction maybe gone wrong, or the way that you presented the task gone wrong, and kind of troubleshoot and fix it and kind of decide how you're going to go about it next time to possibly improve it in the future. And again, choose your battles. Some things are just not worth the fight. Just avoid, the power struggle, the because I said so's. It's not going to work in the long run. So choose your battles, parents. Identify what are negotiables and non-negotiables and go from there. So that is all I have for you guys today. I hope that it was enough information and that you're able to take away all or parts of it. Of course, if you have any questions for any one of us, reach out. My email is cwilson@sju.edu.org. And if you have any additional questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks, guys, and have a great one.